Good evening. All right. According to YouTube, I've been live for 14 seconds. It's Gordon Causey and Candy the Wonder Pup, who you can see her nose there. Let me orient it. There she is, Candy the Wonder Pup, jumping all over me because I'm holding one of these. Come around the other side. Come the other side. Come around. Come around. Come around the other side. Come this side. Come around this side. Come over here. Come over here. I'm holding it over here. Come over. Come over. They say that border collies are very smart. Not tonight. Hey, I've got Lisa's Life here. Good evening, Lisa's Life. Good to see you back. I know you don't get on for every live. Good to see you. Good to have you here now. All right, let me take care of Candy or else I don't get any peace, especially while I'm holding this. Shake, lay down, speak. All right, come on up. Get in the screen. There you go. It's one of these cheeseburger bacon treats she goes absolutely ballistic for. I've got Danny as well here. He's ready with his Bible, his coffee, I guess. The chat disappeared before I could read it all. Ready to go. Bible, coffee, and ticket with the praying hands and the cross. Amen, brother. Oh, what a day. What a day. I did a very early video early for me. I did a video early this afternoon about another incident involving a plane, this time down in Houston, Texas. And there's just so much happening in the world. I was in church this morning. We were listening to the pastor was giving a sermon. And it was on Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7, a sermon about being discerning. But for whatever reason, I felt myself drawn to flip into my Bible as I was sitting in church to chapter 18 of Revelation, a well-known chapter, the one where it is said in verse 2, fallen is Babylon the Great. And I found myself thinking about the fall of Babylon. But before I keep going, today, the date today is February 2nd, 2025, just after 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time where I am, southeastern Ontario. About an hour from the eastern edge of the Greater Toronto area. I live in rural farming country, primarily apple orchards. And anyway, thank you for the likes. Thank you for the subscriptions. You know, all that stuff. Always appreciate everyone who likes and subscribes to the channel. Blah, blah, blah. What YouTubers say. And yeah, Danny's saying happy Groundhog Day. I haven't heard what Wyerton Willie had to say, but apparently Puxatawny Phil, and that's in, I believe, Pennsylvania, Puxatawny, Pennsylvania. Puxatawny Phil apparently saw his shadow, which means he was frightened, went back into his burrow, and there's another 6 weeks of winter. It doesn't matter what Wyerton It doesn't matter what Wyerton Willie, spring is never right around the corner in Canada on February 2nd. At best, we can hope for a mild March. At best, I think that I've said it before, our Groundhog Day, Canadian Groundhog Day, should be March 2nd, not February 2nd. But at any rate, let's get on to the news. We know these, I've got Danny saying that spring, the official day of spring is March, typically it's March 21st. That's called the spring equinox. That is the day on which the hours of sunlight and darkness are even. 12 hours sun, 12 hours of night. And Lisa's Life has started, I am assuming, indoor gardening, planting her seeds now indoors to be transplanted in late April, early May in all likelihood. All right, the news. What is happening in the news? There is a ton happening in the news. The airplane situation. We know about what happened in Washington, D.C. with the passenger aircraft and the Black Hawk helicopter crashing into the Potomac River, and 67 people died a day, or I think it was a day later or 2 days later. That plane in that Lear jet, which apparently was built, they stopped building these Lear jets in 1986, sometime around there. So you've got an old Lear jet, 30 plus years of age, uh, 86, 96, 2006, 2016, coming up on 40 years old. It crashed in Philadelphia in a residential section, came down like a rocket and a massive fireball, and we know about that. I believe that crash resulted in 7 deaths, 6 people who were on board the plane, and a 7th person who was on the ground, maybe in a vehicle or something, and a number of people hospitalized. So bang, bang, one right after the other. And then this morning, sometime around 8:30 or so. I don't know if that's 8:30 a.m. in Texas time or East Coast time, whatever time it was in the morning. A plane was taxiing to take off from the Houston airport when they had engine trouble, and apparently it's reported that at least one wing was on fire. Someone had a cell phone camera aimed out the window where the wing is, and the wing was smoking. So that happened. And then I further heard of another story from Chicago's O'Hare Airport, where there was a vehicle tugging or towing an airplane, which apparently happens regularly. A plane will be pulled, tugged, or towed down the runway. Tugged, towed, pulled down the runway. And what happened was another aircraft came by, and the wing of another aircraft struck the vehicle towing or tugging this other airplane and knocked the towing vehicle over, pinning the operator of the vehicle inside. Apparently significant injuries. I don't know that they're life-threatening. I don't believe they are, but that individual has been hospitalized. So they're right there as 4 incidents, 2 major. And I have to question the degree to which the news is now focusing on things and wonder whether the situation in Houston would be noteworthy, or even this incident in Chicago. Would they be noteworthy were it not for the fact that we just had 2 major incidents over the Potomac River in D.C. involving the Black Hawk and a regional passenger jet, and then this fireball in Philadelphia resulting from a medevac Lear jet just crashing into the ground at what appears to be very high speed. Those are significant, newsworthy any day of the week. But would a plane, how often do planes catch fire? I'm sure it has happened before. And it would be reported on, but no injuries, no fatalities. Is it that significant? And likewise with this case in O'Hare, do these type of accidents happen a few times a year, once or twice a year? There are so many airports in the United States. O'Hare, I think at one time, and maybe still, was long regarded as the busiest airport in the world, being something of a regional hub. I took a flight once to San Diego, and I flew from Toronto to Chicago, from Chicago to San Diego, something of a regional hub. It attaches. Now, I had Danny writing something about the pilot of the Black Hawk and saying that the pilot of the Black Hawk was LGBTQ, et cetera, all the other letters. I haven't heard that. There's a lot of focus on this because President Donald Trump of the United States has said that he's ending all DEI initiatives. And he was asked if he thought whether or not DEI type initiatives played any role in the incident in Washington, D.C. And he said, I don't know, we'll find out. And just because someone is a member of LGBTQ, blah, 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 does that mean that they were hired to fill a quota, or were they the best qualified person? Because frankly, at the end of the day, what matters most, I think, to most people is that their pilot, the air traffic controllers, that people in these incredibly sensitive and important positions, that they be supremely qualified to hold the positions that they hold. Nobody wants life and death positions that have the potential to impact life and death to be filled based on quota systems. Well, we have to pick the best person from this category because we've got to meet our quota. We don't have anyone in this particular, this is this whole idea of identity politics and this whole idea of equality of outcome. You know, women represent 50% of the population, roughly. I think it's a little higher for women. I'm not sure. One group is like a slight, but I'm going to call it 50-50. 50% of the population is male, 50% female. In the United States, those are your only two choices. Canada, of course, we have an unlimited list of genders, but there are really only two. And so are women equally represented in all the professions in air traffic control, and pilots, CEOs and executives of Fortune 500 companies? It's interesting how, are 50%, no one seems to care whether 50% of oil rig workers are women, or if 50% of construction workers are women, or if 50% of fill in the blank. And, it's only in certain professions. And I'm going to get on to chapter 18 of Revelation. And I think it speaks to, but Babylon is falling. And in my mind, I'm looking upon Babylon as the United States of America, as the American empire, call it American hegemony, call it Pax Americana, stick whatever label on it you want. But I'll get on to that. What else is happening in the world? Tariffs. That's a big one. Tariffs are going to be imposed on Canadians on Tuesday on a whole litany of goods and products. And so what does that mean? Well, what that means is that a company in the US importing whatever from Canada, widgets, just to use the standard example. So company X is importing widgets from into the United States from Canada. And let's say they import $1 million worth of widgets that they're going to sell into the American marketplace. Well, now those widgets will result in a tariff, which is another way of saying a duty, and that importer will pay the Canadian producer of widgets, they'll pay them their $1 million. Then that importer will have to pay the US government $250,000. And it's widely assumed by many, and I think correctly so, that the importer is then going to pass that cost on to the consumer. Perhaps they can absorb some of it, reduce their profit margins, drive efficiencies, but there's no way I can envision that this type of tariff will not be inflationary. So that's bad for Americans. Well, Canada, as most Canadians will now know, is retaliating, and they will be placing a commensurate 25% tariff on a whole host of American products, which means that Canadians will have to the importer will have to pay a 25% tariff to the Canadian government on the goods that they are importing into Canada. And again, that will be passed on to the consumer. So why would Donald Trump want to bring in tariffs? Well, if an American importer is bringing in widgets from Canada, likely the reason is that he's getting them cheaper than what he can get them from in the United States of America. And so now this will put an incentive on the importer to forget about getting supplied from Ontario, BC, Alberta, wherever. Forget getting your product from there. Instead, look to find an American source for those widgets or whatever. And like, look at something like lumber. Why buy Canadian lumber if it's going to be 25% more? Can you get lumber that is going to be cheaper in the United States of America now that there's a 25% tariff on Canadian lumber? So the tariff, what it does, it has the potential to increase costs on on U.S. consumers when they impose the tariff. And in terms of Canada, if there are companies that are heavily reliant on exporting their products, their goods into the United States, well, it's going to impact their business. And so it could result in a loss of revenue or loss of jobs. Let me read what's being said. So Lisa's life, her garden is an indoor garden. Started this weekend under lights, indoors and under lights. And then what I had said, I caught it just, Danny is saying that apparently the Black Hawk pilot was LGBT plus. It should be qualification based. I think the vast majority of people would agree with you that someone piloting an aircraft, especially in our incredibly busy skies, someone working in air traffic control, in what I'll call mission critical jobs that have the potential to impact health, safety, and things of that nature. Obviously, you want a merit-based system. It's just one of those duh statements. Danny is writing, Trudeau is working on destroying Canada by going toe-to-toe with Trump. He is not qualified to do this. He's apparently implementing his own tariffs. Yes, and there are more coming, apparently. Trump said, if we fix our border, letting in illegals and fentanyl in particular, tariffs ends. Have you heard this also? Yes, I have heard this, and I've also heard that Canada has gone down to the U.S. They've created a video, apparently, showing enhancements in the border. They had drones activity. There's been a large investment. I think it's like $1.4 billion in tightening security at the border. And Hank is writing, hello, people, or whatever you identify as. This world has gone crazy. And that's where I'm going to be talking a lot about this chapter 18 of the book of Revelation, John's Revelation. But what else has happened in the world? There have been earthquakes rocking. Now they're being called tremors. I think the biggest one is 4.9, which isn't insignificant, but it's not cataclysmic by any stretch, on the Greek island of Santorini. And those who know ancient history will know that about 2,500 years ago, roughly 2,500 years ago, there was a massive eruption of a volcano on Santorini, along with massive earthquakes and massive aftershocks. This, to put this in historical perspective, from a biblical perspective, we are talking about the time in and around the Israelite exodus out of Egypt, I've spoken of the fact before that there is a documentary available here on YouTube for free, produced by none other than Canadian James Cameron of Avatar and Titanic fame. He actually appears in the documentary. He introduces a researcher by the name of Simka Yakubovich, who is examining the Exodus story from an archaeological perspective. And this Santorini volcano erupted about 2,500 years ago, in and around the time of the Exodus. And in this documentary I have watched a couple times now, it is speculated by Simka Yakubovich and others that the eruption and the subsequent earthquakes could very well explain the biblical plagues as recounted in Exodus, the sky going dark, even the Nile River turning blood red, because seismic activity can release methane gas into the water. And if there's iron oxide in the water, it will turn red, poisoning the water. And it's something that has happened in more recent history in Cameroon, where something similar happened. Which if the water becomes poisonous, then the frogs who can get out of the water leave, and you have a plague of frogs. Then the fish start rotting, though, because they can't leave the water, and that leads to an infestation of gnats and bugs, and would potentially draw in locusts. And you look at the plagues as recounted in the Bible, they're also recounted on the famous Ipuwer papyrus, extra biblical account. And there's a stela, which is a large, almost like a massive gravestone, if you like. It's a great big stone with writing on it detailing history. And I think it's in the Cairo Museum or maybe the British Museum. And it likewise corroborates what's written in Exodus, as well as this Ipuwer papyrus, basically 3 sources. And now there is news that this volcano on Santorini, which very well may be tied to the events that led to the Israelite exodus out of Egypt, there's the potential for activity right now. Currently, what they're saying is that what I just read is that the tremors and the earthquakes are the result of seismic activity and not volcanic activity, and that they do not believe an eruption on this island is imminent or likely. They also note it cannot be discounted either. And then I have Danny writing HARP, which I forget what it stands for, but that's basically the group the technology involved in weather modification, which does exist. Weather modification technology absolutely exists. It's now made its way into the mainstream. What's the difference between conspiracy and news? 6 months to 5 years. And I'm just trying to read a shaking to awaking. Wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes in various places. These are things that happen all the time, but are we hitting an inflection point? And then, the elephant in the room for me is AI. I was in church this morning, and the pastor was talking to a degree about the difference between the generations and how those of us in older generations, like myself and those older than me, that we have difficulty interacting with those younger than us. And he brought up ChatGPT and how it is everywhere and how kids are using it as a tool and how it's shaping their worldview. And is it a good thing? He said, and this is, I would disagree with the pastor at my church, but he was saying that, it can be good. It can be good if used wisely. I would disagree, Glenn. That's the name of the pastor. I think Glenn's heart is absolutely 100% in the right place. But I think AI, I ultimately view it as being demonic. No other way to put it. I know that sounds a little nut bar style. It's not demonic. Oh, I think it is demonic. I think AI is leading us down a path. I think it is the new, in a fashion, I think it's very much akin to the new Tower of Babel, which is a pretty good segue into reading chapter 18. But before I do that, I had one other note, and that is about the bipolar nature of our world right now. And I'm going to speak specifically about a guy, the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, he's probably the most polarizing figure in the world right now. People either love him or hate him. People either see him as a saint or as the devil incarnate. And it's an unfortunate reality in our world that we seem to be pushed into being either all in on someone or all against someone. And when it comes to Trump, I prefer to compartmentalize, to say what I like and what I don't like. There are things I do like about Trump, and there are things that I do not like about Trump. I do not like the way he's going all in on AI and cryptocurrencies, which is what a CBDC is. I do not like this tariff situation because it's reminding me more and more of the lead up to World War I. We have a lot of ticks in the boxes that have been happening since Trump got elected and before, denoting, and I've been talking about it for a while, heretofore traditionally neutral countries like, I believe, Norway and certainly Sweden, that have maintained their neutrality for years, are now joining up with NATO. And why are traditionally neutral countries all of a sudden lining up into militaristic alliances? And I suspect the reason is because the writing is on the wall. To quote from the book of Daniel, the writing is on the wall. People can see what is coming. Those in the corridors of power know that we're heading toward conflict. Nationalism is on the rise. Apparently, I haven't read the story, but I just saw the headline reported by ESPN stating that Raptor fans, Toronto Raptor in the NBA, that they have taken to booing the U.S. national anthem, and I think that's disgusting. I would not, if I was at any venue where they started to boo the Star Spangled Banner, I think I would likely start, I'm sure, I would start to sing it at the top of my voice. Horrible as it may be. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? I still remember all of it. A lot of Canadians do. It was heartwarming a while ago. I think it was at the Scotiabank Place or Air Canada Centre, whatever it was called at the time, where the Toronto Maple Leafs play. And there was a power outage or something, and the audio for the Star Spangled Banner cut out. And the Canadian hockey fans, the Toronto hockey fans, took it up and finished the anthem, and they sang it. And I thought that was wonderful. That's what we should be doing. We should be reaching out our hands to our American brothers and sisters and not booing each other's national anthems. Certainly Canadians, we shouldn't be booing the American national anthem. What's happening between Trump and Trudeau and between, this is economic. And it's going to get bad, I think. It's going to be inflationary. It's going to impact jobs, certainly more. And Canada will be disproportionately hurt. It's going to hurt the Americans too, but I think it'll hurt Canada far worse. We have a much smaller economy. We're far more reliant on the United States than they are on us. That is not to say that the Americans won't suffer in a trade war with Canada, but it'll be industry specific. I think in Canada, the pain will be much more broadly felt. Whereas in the United States, I think the pain will be felt in certain sectors of the economy. If wood, lumber becomes significantly more expensive, then that's going to affect the construction industry and anything else that needs wood. So not a pleasant situation, not a pleasant message, conflict. And anyway, so I'm gonna dive in for the last half of my video. I'm gonna try and keep it to around an hour. I'm just reading. Danny's bringing up the point that I mentioned about where we saw. I think that was at the Air Canada Center or whatever they call it. And Danny is writing that he's of the opinion that they caused the earthquake in Haiti and Indonesia at Christmas, and that they are engineered. And then I've got Hank writing that the world has been weighed in balance and have been found wanting. Oh, yes. And that's our world. Whether you live in the United States or in Canada, we are part of this American hegemony, this Pax Americana, which I'm going to be talking about. Let's see. And Danny says we're better than that than to boo the U.S. national anthem. I would like to think so too, but apparently not. Danny says it means that we will buy Canadian and put Canada first. Yeah, but there's a lot of things that we don't manufacture. We don't grow oranges here, except in greenhouses. And, there are a lot of things that we simply rely on American manufacturing to deliver to us. Or, go check out the labels, the made in labels on everything you buy. Most of it is made overseas. A lot of it is from the US. And even Canadian manufacturing relies on things coming in from the United States. This is not good. I'm not an economist, but I did take some courses, or I took one course in economics anyway. And man, not good. Conflict, and then people's backs get up. We could be heading into a bad economic time. And how have bad economic times been confronted before? War. Look at the Great Depression in the 1930s. What brought the world out of the Great Depression? World War II. Let me take a drink. It's too early for my voice to start getting raked out, but I want to read chapter 18 of the book of Revelation. And it starts out by saying, after this I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his splendor. And he called out with a mighty voice, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit, a haunt of every foul and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk the wine of her impure passion, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich with the wealth of her wantonness. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her as she herself has rendered, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double draught for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and played the wanton, played the harlot, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart, she says, a queen I sit, I am no widow, mourning I shall never see, so shall her plagues come in a single day, pestilence, and mourning, and famine, and she shall be burned with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. I'll stop there. That's the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Babylon. Where do we get this term Babylon? It's from the Babylonian Empire. Most will know that. And the Babylonian Empire, I mean, empires rise, empires fall. We know that. The Assyrian Empire, with its big city at Nineveh, you're looking at about 700-ish BC. I may not get the dates precisely right, but I don't want to bother to go and recheck this stuff, so I might not get the dates 100% right, but I think I'm pretty close in the ballpark. We're looking at 700 or so BC, 700 years before Christ, in and around there, that the Assyrian Empire was the dominating world player in the ancient world. And then in around 500 BC, give or take, say 50 years maybe, then the Babylonian Empire rose. And the Babylonian Empire became basically in biblical terms, it became the archetype for an evil, oppressive, all of the descriptions we've just had. But it's an archetype, because even John is writing this revelation on the island of Patmos in probably somewhere 70, 80 AD. Some say 90 AD, long after the Babylonian Empire has risen and fallen. The Babylonians were conquered by the Medo-Persians, or the Persian Empire, if you prefer. Xerxes 300, the famous movie about the battle at Thermopylae, I think is the name, the Hot Gates. So then you had the Medo-Persian Empire. Then after that came the Greek Empire of Alexander the Great. Then after Alexander died, the Greek Empire, it split into into 4 empires. And then after those empires died out, then you had the Roman Empire took over. And the Roman Empire was the great world empire at the time that John was writing this letter, but he doesn't refer to, fallen is Rome. He uses the archetype of Babylon. That would be my supposition. That would be what I would put forth, is that Babylon is a representation of a great world empire, like Babylon, like Alexander the Great, like Rome, or like America now. And what we've seen is that empires, global empires, when we talk about the Roman Empire, was it global? No, it wasn't global in the sense that it was centered in the Middle East and Europe and Asia, North Africa. That was the Roman Empire. It didn't include North America, South America, didn't include Australia, but you get the point. Now we have the American Empire, and empires end. Empires implode. And we are living at a time that the American Empire is very much on the decline. And when I read all these admonitions that God has America been the land of the free and the home of the brave all the time? Why did they invade Vietnam? The Trail of Tears. There's been a lot of things that America has done wrong over the course of her history. Remember when Obama was, I think it was when he was running for president the first time, he had a pastor that had given a sermon, and it was Obama's pastor. It was his kind of spiritual advisor or whatever. And this pastor gave a sermon where he said, "God damn America, God damn America." And he didn't mean that as, in the pejorative God damn it sense. What he meant is God damn America and he he gave a whole sermon talking about slavery, talking about the American treatment of its native population, the Trail of Tears being a primary example, when Indians were forced off their land and forced to trek, killing thousands, maybe tens of thousands. I don't know how many people died on that Trail of Tears when they had their ancestral homelands stolen from them by Americans, by the American government, and were forced off them. Then you look at like in Canada, the internment of Japanese Canadians happened in the US as well. They interred Japanese Americans. Then you look at the Jim Crow era and what happened in the United States, where they basically re-enslaved a lot of Black Americans with petty little laws that were designed simply to put Black men back in jail so that they could be forced to rebuild the South. An interesting point of history is that the large Black populations that moved from the South into cities like Chicago, like Detroit, like California, like places like Oakland, that the exodus of Blacks from the South wasn't because of famine, wasn't because of war, it was because a lot of Black individuals did not want to live in the Jim Crow South. And so they emigrated out of the South and they moved to northern cities like Chicago, which prior to the Civil War did not have a large Black population. And Danny's writing that for a long time, Black individuals could not own a gun in the U.S. If that's true, and I'm assuming I don't have any, that would not surprise me in the least. I'll take you at your word. And wouldn't surprise me at all that they wouldn't extend the Second Amendment rights to Black Americans. But so to my way of thinking, Babylon, as being written here by John, there are two ways you can look at prophecy. There's two ways you can look at so-called end times prophecy. You can think it's the end of all ends, or you can think it's a cyclical thing that happens. As I said, the Assyrian Empire rose and fell. The Babylonian Empire rose and fell. Persian Empire rose and fell. Greek Empire, Alexander, rose and fell. Seleucid Empire rose and fell. The Arabian Empire rose and fell. Ottoman Empire rose and fell. Now it's the American Empire. Is it going to fall? The American Empire, it's interesting, the British Empire had its rise and it had its decline, but it basically was absorbed more or less into the American Empire. Became, subservient to the American Empire, became part of Pax Americana, this what they call the American hegemony. Now we have a new rising power, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, but other countries as well that are threatening to challenge the American empire, challenge American hegemony, challenge the US dollar as the default currency of the world and to replace it with a BRICS currency. And here's Danny writing, if Iran, Russia, and China get together, we will be in a hurt locker. I think it would start World War III. I think this is what we're heading for. I was just mentioning BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. You're talking about massive populations. Obviously, with India and China, you're looking at in and around 3 billion of this planet's 8 billion people. And then, so that's Brazil. I think their population rivals the United States. I think they're in and around the 300 million mark. Russia is 200 plus, probably 500 million more there. India, China, and South Africa. I don't think South Africa's population is as big as the other players, but I think we're talking about economies around the world that would represent north of half the world's population. And they are threatening to rival and to supplant the US as the world's dominant player in the world. Babylon is falling. And I wanted to bring up one last little point, and it goes to the end of this chapter 18 in the book of Revelation, because Robert Kennedy Jr. was being grilled by the Senate, and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who's I think pretty much an avowed socialist, was asking Kennedy whether or not he would affirm what he believes is true. And Sanders believes that he wants healthcare to be listed as a human right, basically like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and healthcare as an unalienable right. And Kennedy wouldn't give that same designation. Kennedy juxtaposed it with free speech and said, well, free speech has to be an inalienable right. With healthcare, it's a little more nuanced. And I'm here to tell you that as a Canadian, where we have universal healthcare, it was the universality of the Canadian medical establishment, our healthcare system, that was used as justification for many to rationalize the necessity of all the lockdown measures and mandates that came out during the COVID era. Because we have a universal healthcare system, that justifies imposing draconian measures on the Canadian population, because non-compliance could negatively impact this publicly funded service. And so you no longer can exercise your right of freedom of assembly. You can no longer exercise your right of freedom of speech. We're going to censor the living crap out of you. You no longer have the right to protest. We're going to freeze your bank account. Everything that happened in Canada, a lot of it can be tied back to the fact that we have a universal healthcare system. And I had individuals arguing with me over my refusal to get the jab. And they'd say, well, you have to, we have a universal healthcare system. And if the universal healthcare system says that everyone has to get this to keep the system itself from being overwhelmed, well, then you have to do it. And I disagreed. I find myself at a strange point in history. I'm getting older. I'm 58. And this is my age is when people typically start to access the healthcare system more and more. Maybe my attitudes will change. I haven't been to a doctor since 2021. So it's been 4 years, roughly, since I've been to a doctor. I don't access the medical system. If I get sick, I stay home and I get better. I self-treat. I don't even medicate, because medication comes from a doctor. I just drink lots of fluids, chicken soup, the old standards. Anyway. Now, Danny is talking about the fact with the Euphrates drying up, the army from the east will be able to just walk on in. There's and I think it might be chapter 16, 14, I forget which, where it's chapter 16. Chapter 16, book of Revelation. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple telling the 7 angels, go and pour out on the earth the 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the first angel went and poured its bowl, or his bowl, on the earth, and foul and evil sores came upon the men who bore the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. Take a look at the pictures that were resulting when people came down with the case of monkeypox or mpox. Then the second angel poured out his bowl into the sea, and it became like the blood of a dead man, and every living thing died that was in the sea. Okay, here it is, the chapter, or verse 12. The sixth angel poured his bowl on the great river Euphrates, which Danny just mentioned, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. That's what Danny was referencing, chapter 16, verse 12 of Revelation. And do a news search. The Euphrates River is drying up. Some blame climate change. Many blame the fact that Turkey, which is is upstream, so to speak, that they're through their damming network are drying it out. And we have saber rattling from Erdogan, leader of Turkey, talking about the necessity for the Islamic world to unite and to confront Israel. Prophetic times we are living in. Let me get to the end. I'm going to start verse 21. So I'm going back to chapter 18, and now I'm going to skip ahead to verse 21. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a giant millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, "So shall Babylon the Great be thrown down with violence, and shall be found no more. And the sound of harpers and minstrels, of flute players and trumpeters shall be heard in thee no more. And a craftsman of any craft shall be found in thee no more. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard in thee no more. And the light of a lamp shall shine in thee no more." The lamp, if you go to the early part of the book of Revelation, lamps are references to the churches. So it's saying the lamp, the church, shall shine in thee no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride shall be heard in thee no more. The bridegroom is Jesus. The bride is the church, the Big C church. So, I mean, we're already there to a large degree. That's why at the beginning it said, "Come out of her, my people. Come out of her. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, and all nations were deceived by thy sorcery." All nations were deceived by thy sorcery. I want you to fixate on that word sorcery. And I want anyone so inclined, and that's chapter 18, book of Revelation. It's the last word of verse 23, sorcery. And if you go and you look up the original Greek text of how it was written in Greek, how it was rendered in Greek, the word for sorcery is the English translation of the Greek word, the ancient Greek word, Koine Greek, pharmakia, which is also the basis of the word pharmacy or pharmaceuticals or pharmaceutics, drugs. I've spoken before on this channel about how no pain, no discomfort, no need to, anything you need. If you're anxious, take a pill. If you can't sleep, take a pill. If you're overweight, we have a pill for that. We got a pill for everything nowadays. And back in 1960, that was when the pharmaceutical industry introduced a new product, which basically has turned society upside down for what it had always been throughout all of human history. And the way the way the world was structured completely changed, completely turned upside down, at least in the Western developed world. And that was due to the introduction of the birth control pill. Do you think we would be living in a world now where we don't know the difference, or some people don't know the difference between a man and a woman in a world without the birth control pill? I would submit no. In a world without the birth control pill, we would know, we would never have forgotten the difference between a man and a woman. And gender roles and the question of men being women and women being men, wouldn't be a question either. because there would be biological reality. Biological reality says that men and women are attracted to one another. And men and women engage in sexual activity together. And then the women give birth. Not all the time, but exclusively women give birth. And it's only in a world now where most of the population out there has never lived in a world where birth control didn't exist. I haven't. I was born in 1966. And it's completely upended this world. And I often go back to the fact that when you read the prophets in the Old Testament and in Judges and talking about how giving prophetic warnings to the people of Israel to make right with God, to get to start recognizing the fabric of reality and to stop doing that which is right in your own eyes. When these prophetic warnings came out, it could be 50, 60, 70 years before the prophetic warning would come to fruition and bad things would happen to the Israelites. Well, how long ago was 1960? I'm 58. So it was 50, 60 years ago. These warnings, I've mentioned on here before, there was a guy named Herbert W. Armstrong in The World Tomorrow, and I'm here, and he used to say, I'm here to tell you, friends, we are living in the last days. That's what they were saying. That's what Old Testament prophets used to say. Get right. Our world is going to come crashing down on us. These are our last days if we don't get right with God. And 40, 50, 60 years, sometimes 70 years later, the hammer would come down. Herbert W. Armstrong was giving those prophetic warnings back in the late 70s and into the 80s. It's not that long after. Let me read what's being written. Danny's saying that pharmakia can also mean toxic. Sheriff of YouTube saying, don't worry, Gordon. Trump will make the woke liberals finally close the Roxham Road, illegal alien foot crossing. That's that the Roxham Road is Quebec, and I think it's the state of Vermont. I might be wrong on the state. That a lot of people were crossing by foot. And Sheriff is saying that Sheriff is hasn't been here for a while, but he loves to poke smart rear end. I'll say it, smart ass. Denny's writing about petroleum-based medicines. A lot of petrochemical products are in the food chain. Something else that's coming up during the Kennedy talks. I just found out I'm never touching another box of Fruit Loops, whether they're from, apparently the American ones are the super bad ones. It's not as bad here in Canada, apparently, but never eating them again. I'm trying to be a lot more careful with what I eat and to avoid ultra processed food as much as I can. And what Sheriff writing? TSP in Cheerios. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff, all kinds of chemicals, all kinds of, I got some potato chips here. Goodness knows what's in these things. You'd like to think it's just a potato and maybe fried in oil, but goodness knows it's probably got chemicals in there too. And anyway, that's the message for tonight. That's my video for tonight. All over the place. Tariffs, volcanic eruptions, or not volcanic, sorry, seismic activity on the Greek island of Santorini. This AI world, and I mentioned earlier, I don't know whether I mentioned it yesterday or in my video of this morning, but the fact is there was a report that I saw, and apparently there was a foreign player, might have been Iran, might have been Russia, might have been China. I came across an article, I didn't read it in depth, that foreign players, like one of those aforementioned three, could be involved or had plans or was making designs toward destabilizing the commercial airline industry in the United States as a means to, bring the U.S. down. So let's read what's being written. And this TSP that's in Cheerios, according to Sheriff of YouTube, is trisodium phosphate, and that it's good for cleaning your motorhome against moss. Lovely. Danny's saying U.S. Fruit Loops use dyes. We use fruit and veg juice for color. All right. Hank's wishing everyone a good night. I'm going to do the same. We'll see when I do the next one. I'm buying a new laptop next week. Maybe I'll wait until I get the actual laptop, and it'll be an up-to-date laptop. The one I had been using heretofore was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. And so it couldn't even run the most updated version of Windows because it's, too obsolete. And which is probably the reason why it pooched. Is because it just couldn't handle, they call it designed obsolescence. Things are designed now to, have an expiration date. And I figure getting 6 or 7 years out of the laptop is probably pretty darn good. So anyway, God bless. There, come out of her. Come out of her. There is a note here of hope at the end of this chapter 18. After I read that, all the nations were deceived by thy pharmakia. Verse 24 says, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and all who have been slain on earth. So even though you're in Babylon, that doesn't mean that you're precluded from a place in glory. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, those who will be at the great throne judgment, because this life is not the end. So I'll end it the way I always do. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and lift up his countenance upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you, and may he grant you peace. And as I always say, he will. Get into relationship, get into his word. You can trust these words. I've got to do a video on that shortly about why we can trust the Bible and why there are so many voices out there saying that what you're reading, it's not, you've been fooled, you've been deceived. I have the truth. Don't trust that Bible. It's been warped, changed, altered. There's other documents out there, the Gospel of the Holy 12 or the Chosen 12, this secret document that only I know about, only I and and you're being fooled and deceived. Be careful. Be very careful, very discerning in this world. And check it, can you trust this book? Yes. It's authoritative, and it is more than sufficient. So God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Good night, all.